As part of Gran Turismo 7's Spec Free update, 7 new events were added to the game, 5 taking place between 2 new tracks, 1 taking place at Goodwood and the other taking place at Blue Moon Bay Speedway. And in today's video I'm going to take you through all 7 of these events and give you my thoughts and opinions on them. But before we get into this video, I'm trying to get this channel to 70,000 subscribers. So if you want to stay up to date with everything GT7 and motorsport gaming related, then feel free to leave a like, subscribe and turn your notifications on. Anyway, let's get to. So then the first event of this update is going to be the Japanese FF Challenge 450, which returns once again to Gran Turismo 7 in 2025. Now, as for the finer details here, it's a 4-lap sprint with a total of 10 cars. You must use a road car from Japan with a front-wheel drive layout. First place is 50k, second is 30k, and third is 20k, with your main rival cars being a bunch of front-wheel drive Japanese vehicles. BOP is off. You must use a garage car settings are allowed, there is no damage, and no penalties are on. So let's go ahead then and get into this 4-lap sprint race. And of course this event is going to be aimed at the Mitsubishi FTO. Of course, very much a certified Gran Turismo classic here. Now, one thing that I did really enjoy about having the FTO in these events is the fact that now the Honda domination can pretty much come to an end with something to finally rival them. Of course, the Japanese FF Challenge is notorious for Honda Civics and Honda Integras to outright dominate them, but they finally now have a challenge with the FTO's inclusion. So it definitely made the race feel just that much diverse, and I hope when I go back to the rest of the FF challenges that the FTO can now appear in them. So honestly, this was a much better step in the right direction just by including one single different manufacturer that has the ability to now go on to win these races. So overall, I did really enjoy this one, and it's actually not too difficult whatsoever. My FTO here was completely stock and won by almost 10 seconds in the end. So there we have it then, first place in the bag and the first of 7 events down. As for the overall time for this one, 6 minutes 4.789 and a fastest lap on the 4th and final lap of a 129.677. As for the payout here then, we managed to take a total of 75,000 credits with the clean race bonus. Honestly, not too bad overall. So does this first event of the Spec Free update get my seal of approval? Absolutely, and once again it's for obvious reason. The inclusion of the FTO certainly mixed it up a little bit. These events have been showing up all the time in 2025, however it's always been rinse and repeat. Honda Civics or Honda Integras winning every single one of them and being the only real proper cars that can go ahead and actually give the player a good run for their money. So the inclusion of the FTO really does make an entire difference to the entire championship now. So for the second event of this update, we're going to head over to Goodwood. This will be the final of the 2 pre-existing track events for the Spec Free update, and this time around it's the European Sunday Cup 400, pretty much made for the Fiat Panda. 4 laps, 12 cars on the grid, must be a road car from one of the European countries, 52k for first, 31.2k for second and 20.8k for third. Your main rival cars are typically some of the lower rated European cars in the game. Car restrictions, well, BOP is off. You must use a garage car and car settings are allowed. There's no damage and both penalties once again are set to off. So let's get into the actual event itself then. We have 4 laps up ahead of us, and of course we're going to go ahead and use the Fiat Panda. Now this is pretty much fully upgraded other than the tyres being on sports mediums. It's putting out around about 133 brake horsepower, but it is incredibly lightweight, and honestly I just could not stop laughing the entire time during this race. Seeing those incredibly skinny tyres and that suspension getting absolutely pushed to the maximum will never not be funny, and the plucky little Panda would actually go on to take victory here. Yes, admittedly it did take me a couple of goes, as at first I tried it with 105 brake horsepower and it just was not enough. And in fact, to prove the Panda is so slow, typically the final car on the grid will be the Panda and it will end up getting lapped. There's a couple of cars you want to watch out for here, that is the Carrera and the Golf, as they are much quicker than anything else this event can field. In the end, we would come up to cross the line, as we can see here on the 4th and final lap, with a fair decent lead of just under 3 seconds. So there we go then, first place for event number 2, a total time of 6:17.835 and a fastest lap on lap 2 of a 1:32.709. As for the payout, unfortunately, we are not going to get the clean race bonus here, but we do take away 52,000 credits. So admittedly, whilst this is going to be the weakest event on paper for this update, I did really enjoy it. The inclusion of the Fiat Panda and just how hilarious it looks will never not put a smile on my face. You can really throw this thing around with upgrades, incredibly lightweight, skinny tyres and a ridiculous suspension. It is just so much fun, and I would fully recommend trying this one out. The third event of the update sees us finally head over to the latest tracks in the game, and we're going to begin then with the Nissan GTR Cup at Gilles Villeneuve. And of course this has a brand new car as its poster boy. That's going to be the Mainz BNR 34. So then 5 laps, 16 cars on the grid. You must use a sports compound of tyre and have your car at 700 or less pp. When it comes to car choice, you have a bunch of different GTR badge vehicles, including the Z-Tune and of course the new BNR 34 Mainz. As for first place, 88k for this one, 52.8k for second, and third is 35.2. Main rival cars are a bunch of different modified GTRs. Car restrictions, BOP is off, you must use a garage car, and car settings are allowed. There's no damage, and both penalties are set to off. So let's get to it then. Of course the laps are a bit longer on this one, and the grid is much bigger, of course made up of a bunch of different GTR badge vehicles. And honestly, although we do kind of complain that we get yet another GTR badged vehicle, when it's building up a series like this as well as it is, then I cannot complain. And honestly, the BNR 34 I fell in love with straight away. It sounds incredible, it looks incredible, and honestly it performs very well. However, yes, it is incredibly expensive at 3 million credits. In terms of the racing here though, the Nissan GTR Cup really did surprise me. These cars feel massive at this track, but really that just makes it even more competitive as you have to work your way through the field. I eventually did on lap 4, and I'd go on to take victory of just over 5 seconds, so the other mines certainly keeping pace with me as we closed out this race. Total time then 8 minutes 43.994 and a fastest lap on lap 5 of a 1:43.844. Now, as for the payout for this one, because yes, it's classed as a bit of a harder event, it's going to pay out a little bit more. In terms of the payout then, it's going to be a total of 132,000 credits with that clean race bonus, so not bad at all. Now of course, for someone like me, the Mainz brand showing up in Gran Turismo is absolutely awesome. They've produced some iconic cars over the years, and probably none are more iconic than the BNR 34. This thing is a serious monster. Yes, it's expensive, but honestly, if you can afford it, I would fully recommend it. Its performance is great, it looks very aggressive, and honestly it sounds incredible, and it just made this race a much more enjoyable time. I would certainly recommend trying this one out, and really the payment isn't too bad either. So it's time for the last of the more casual events for this update, and that's going to take us over to Yas Marina for the first time with the Ferrari Circuit Challenge, of course aimed at the 296 GTB. The event itself is 5 laps, 16 cars on the grid, 700 or less PP rating, and must be a Ferrari. First is 90k, second is 54, and third is 36k. Main rival cars are a bunch of different Ferraris from over the years. BOP is off, you must use a garage car, and car settings are allowed. No damage once again, and no penalties once again either. So let's go ahead then and actually get into the event. So again, we have 5 laps up in front of us, a full 16 car grid made up of a bunch of different Ferraris from over the years. And I have to admit, this was perhaps the weakest event in terms of fun factor of the entire update. Yes, it's great being able to use a 296 because I think it's an awesome road car and it's great to see it in GT7. But honestly, the racing in the Ferrari Challenge series has never been that great. And I think that's because, unlike with the GTR Cup, none of the Ferraris actually get upgraded. So it's a massive mixed bag, and realistically, if you just pick one of the faster road models, then you're guaranteed a victory, and that's exactly what happened here. The only two cars that really put up a fight would be the other 296 GTB and the F8. Apart from that, nothing really put up any fight whatsoever as we just cruised our way through the grid. We took the lead on lap 4 and went on in the end to take victory of over 6 seconds. So of course, another first place there. In terms of the total time here, once again a little bit longer, 10 minutes 7.798 and a fastest lap of 2 minutes 0.607 on the 5th and final lap. As for the payout then, it is going to be, I guess, about the same really, but without the clean race bonus. So unfortunately, not paying much more than a GTR Cup, but just taking a bit longer. So yeah, I guess unfortunately the Ferrari Challenge just has this habit of not upgrading any of the Ferraris. I get about the purity of the Italian brand, but unfortunately it doesn't make for great racing when there's such a difference between the older Ferraris and the newer ones, whereas with the GTRs they will typically get upgraded to match the actual newer models that are on the track. So unfortunately for me, in terms of the racing itself, the Ferrari Challenge was the weakest event of this update. So on to the 5th event of this update, and once again at Yas Marina, it's going to be the longest event of this update at 15 laps. It's the Group 1 Prototype Series, of course aimed at Group 1 cars. However, it is very much an open championship. So 15 laps, 20 cars, 3 times fuel rate and 5 times tyres. Of course, you must use a racing compound of tyre here. PP rating is 950 or less. Now, of course, being a longer event, that means the payouts are a bit better. So first is 300,000 credits, second is 180, and third is 120. Your main rival cars are a bunch of different Group 1 machinery, including LMP1s, hypercars, and of course VGTs. BOP is off, you must use a garage car, and car settings are allowed. No damage, shortcut set to weak, and no wall collision penalty. So let's go ahead and get into the race then. So this was a great excuse to use the brand new F3 500B, which I honestly just already love. It drives incredibly and it sounds absolutely awesome, especially at a track here like the Yas Marina. So I kind of understand the Formula car kind of ruins the immersion of a Group 1 event, but honestly, when it doesn't have its own set event, I just really wanted to use the thing. Now, really, I did notice a couple of times that there was a few yellow flags being put out, and that was mainly for older Group C machinery that would end up spinning around for some reason. I'm not quite sure, but I'm assuming when it comes to the, I guess, slower corners, they try and plant the throttle and it just causes the cars to rotate and of course spin out. So yeah, quite unusual, but just keep an eye out for those. As for the AIs that you'll need to watch out for in this event, it's mainly the McLaren, Audi and Nissan this time around. Now of course the Nissan is typically always quick, however the Audi was a bit of a surprise as that will usually run towards the back of the grid in these Group 1 events. So it was nice to see it actually, you know, doing well for once and I guess changing up the AI. Again, another car that we typically see run right towards the front is the 908, but honestly I didn't have any problems going up against that thing this time. So I only had to take a very late pit stop on this race at the end of lap 12 I believe, just due to actually, you know, running out of fuel at the end. If I hadn't, I did notice that fuel usage is much higher than the tyres here. So again, if you can go ahead and just kind of look after those tyres, you probably won't need to actually change them. I just did it for the sake of having fresh rubber to finish off this race due to having a pretty sizable lead over P2 at this point. So overall, the strategy isn't too difficult here. You're not going to have to worry about weather or anything like that. It's mainly just going to be fuel, but I'm sure a rotary can probably solve that issue. So first place then in the longest event of this update, taking a total time of 24 minutes 26 seconds 0.873, a fastest lap on lap 15 of a 134.152. So let's go ahead then and look at the payout for this one. So of course, with this being the longest event of the update, it does have the highest payout of the update. I didn't get the clean race bonus, but I took 300,000 credits and almost 50 miles traveled. So what did I think of this event then? Well, I have to admit, one of my biggest fears about Yas Marina is that driving something other than modern F1 machinery would probably not feel that great. but it certainly did seem it was the complete opposite of what I believed. The classic F1 cars feel fantastic around here, which I guess I wasn't too worried about, but then again, also the Group 1 machinery does seem to go well here. Maybe the Group C's tend to struggle with the lower speed corners, but the majority of it is very fast and very flowing, and once you do get into that flow at an event like this, it feels absolutely incredible. I would say on the strategy side of things, it's a bit on the weaker side though, so I did definitely enjoy it, but maybe not my favourite. However, it would be the final event at Yas Marina, the World Touring Car 800, that would actually turn out to be my favourite. One thing for me, I've never found the Group 3 or GT3 spec machinery to be that enthralling here. However, when you're actually racing it yourself, it's incredible. So 10 laps then, 20 cars, 3 times fuel and 7 times tyre. You must use a racing compound of tyre, 800 pp or less, 200k for first, 120 for second, and 80k for third. Your main rival cars are a bunch of different Group 3 machinery, which of course, I guess covers a wide variety. Now BOP is off, you must use a garage car and car settings are allowed with no damage, shortcut penalty set to weak, and wall collision penalty off. So let's go ahead then and get into this race. So what made this one so great? Well, I think it's because I didn't expect much. I expected to go from day to night, which of course it does, which looks incredible, but I didn't expect the Group 3 machinery to really race that well here, but I was certainly proven wrong. This car feels fantastic, and the way it can battle with the AI on this rather quite wide layout is absolutely awesome. There's plenty of overtaking opportunities. In the straights you can really get into the slipstream and make use of that huge long mammoth straight, and you just feel like you're on the battle constantly. And again, one thing that I did like, whilst okay maybe it's not the most realistic thing in the world, is that the 2 front runners don't actually tend to pit here. So again, you can really mix up your strategy in how you go about actually chasing them down and trying to get that win. Now for me, that was racing softs on one stint and absolutely flat out, and then racing softs on a second stint and absolutely flat out. Now again, I could have done it on a zero stop strategy if I wanted to, since fuel usage on the 296 wasn't that high, but I just wanted to be absolutely on the edge, and it really did feel that way. And one thing is that yes, it can be quite difficult, especially on the hardest difficulty, but it doesn't feel, I guess, artificially inflated. Again, it feels like you really have to work for it, but it's an incredibly rewarding feeling without feeling like the AI themselves are actually cheap. In the end, I took victory by over 13 seconds after an incredibly hard push on the racing softs there at the end. Total time to complete this was 18 minutes 43 seconds .102, and a fastest lap on lap 7 of a 149.937. Overall, incredibly enjoyable. So you can probably guess what I'm going to say here. Easily my favourite event of the Spec 3 update. I feel like it was very well put together. Do I wish it was longer? Yes. Do I wish it paid more? Of course. However, I feel like what is here and the way it's set up makes it extremely competitive and one of the better World Touring Car 800 events. So let's move in to the final event of Spec 3 then, heading back to Gilles Villeneuve then with Super Formula, 15 laps ahead of us, and I have to admit this was just one of the most frustrating events in the game, and it's something that pretty much always happens with the Super Formulas. But as for the finer details then, 15 laps, 20 cars, 6 times fuel, 18 times tyre. You must use a racing compound on one of these Super Formulas. First place is 250k, second 150 and third 100. Main rival cars once again are a bunch of different Super Formulas from 2023. BOP is off. You must use a garage car and car settings are allowed. No damage, weak shortcut, and of course wall collision is off. So let's talk about this event then, because really the footage that you've seen isn't that great, and I have to admit here I turned the event difficulty down to normal instead of my usual hard difficulty, because the first time I ran it I realised that starting at the back is just absolutely no fun in this type of race. Of course, these Super Formulas heavily rely on slipstream, Now the issue that you end up running into is the fact that the front runners are constantly slipping each other with an open track until one will eventually break free and be able to pull away from the rest of the field, which means that even when you get towards the front, he will be so far ahead that it's almost impossible to catch them. And unfortunately, this happens very regular in the Super Formula events on the hardest difficulty, and it was the same here. Overall though, the actual Super Formulas themselves felt incredibly at home here at Gilles Villeneuve. Now as for my strategy then, it was a racing medium to a racing soft, and of course a bit of extra fuel as we needed to get to the end. So the tyres go on, and of course we do end up over fueling because I just stopped paying attention for some reason. We come out the pits and we are going to lose a few positions. However, we're going to make most of them up on track, but the final one we're going to be able to do when the AI eventually pits. They do tend to pit incredibly late in this event and do tend to have much better tyre wear and fuel usage than you do, even on a hard compound of tyre. It's just really annoying. Anyway, we got the lead back and eventually crossed the line after 15 laps, around about 20 plus seconds ahead. And of course, that's going to be the final victory of the update. As for total time here then, 21 minutes 46 seconds .202 and a fastest lap of a 125.037 on the 5th lap. Now the payout here, I would probably say just isn't worth it. Of course, it's going to be 250k without that clean race bonus. However, if you do manage it, it's 375k. So what do I think of this final event of Spec 3? I have to admit, it's just more frustrating. It had plenty of potential, given the fact that once again it's a Formula 1 used track and the Super Formulas do feel right at home here. But the ugly issues that Super Formula struggles with on the highest difficulty is that every single car will just sit in a slipstream train. But again, that doesn't necessarily happen on the lower difficulties. I feel like it certainly needs a bit of balancing. And there we have it then, all 7 events from Spec 3 done and dusted. Honestly, this was a pretty solid selection of events and really saw a bunch of cars getting used. I do wish something like the Polestar and of course the Renault Espace F1 did have an event specifically for them, but unfortunately that was not the case. But what is here was absolutely solid and some of the better events we've seen for a while. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one. Take care guys. Peace.